Harry spent his first 18 years in Brooklyn, where as a pupil in Catholic schools, he was taught to understand the world in terms of Catechism of the Council of Trent. He enlisted in the Army in 1942 and saw combat in France and Germany in an artillery unit. Harry, after the war, earned a Bachelor of Arts at St. John's University and an MA and PhD at the University of Pennsylvania. He completed his thesis on James Joyce while teaching English and theater at Loyola College and the University at Albany. He has also taught at the American University at Paris and at Xiamen University in China. He was the first person to teach Joyce in that country, where the Irish novelist had been listed on what Staley calls the Chinese Index. He's taught for more than 40 years, and in the classroom, Staley remains an enthusiastic teacher. Although he now restricts himself to a light part-time schedule, eager to take on as many different courses as possible, he once listed his favorites, among them as Eliot Faulkner, the English Romantics, Joyce, Chaucer. Writing for scholarly quarterlies bores him, but he managed to publish enough to secure tenure and eventually a professorship. That much achieved, he concentrated his energies on more creative matters. In the early 70s, he developed with his close colleague, the late Tom Smith, a concert reading and subsequent film script composed of passages from Finnegan's Wake. There followed another film based on the Bridge Ship and Gulls episode. These films were shown at the James Joyce Symposium in Paris and Zurich, and elsewhere in Europe and America. It formed part of seminars and classroom courses at Yale, Buffalo University, the University at Albany, North Carolina State, among others. Although he did write poetry during his career as a teacher and scholar, he decided to more fully to revive his life as a poet. In recent years, he has published in Groundswell, the Snail's Pace Review, Psycho Poetry, Kalamazoo, poems that reached the short list in their national poetry contest, the E! Magazine Off Course, the Little Magazine, and poetry appeared in the Pennsylvania Literary Review, the Arizona Poetry Quarterly, and in New York's Capital Region, and most notably in Ireland. This from Judy Johnson. All one breath selected poems, Harry Staley places his breathtaking first book, The Lives of a Shell-Shocked Chaplain, in the context of a lifetime of careful devotion to the art of poetry. This brilliant, theatrical, and dazzling selection makes it clear that Staley's first book was no flash in the pan, but one set of poems in a career of equally dazzling work. This is the more astonishing in that Staley, recently retired from an academic career, has been, as I wrote in my introduction to his first book, too busy and too modest to promote his own work. There is no poem in this collection that fails to delight, instruct, move, and astonish. Staley has a number of different modes, themes, and voices. He satirizes on Lacan and on the current takeover of English departments by theory, or hilarious. Loaded with Joycean puns, not too surprising from a man who taught courses on Joyce for many years and co-authored a dramatization of Finnegan's Wake. The puns spill over from these academic targets to more serious and sometimes savage reflections on such subjects as what children learn about sex and sin from a Catholic upbringing, aging, loss, and above all, history and war. William Kennedy. 7 years after his first book of poems, The Lives of the Shell-Shocked Chaplain, Staley returns with all one breath, another biography through poetry, tracking with learned elegance and dazzling language the days of Thomas Kelly, a man who cherishes the nameless, invokes pathos from a dead rat, fights forgotten wars, Kelly's dreamed Joycean nun puns. With luminous complexity, he also cherishes family members as he evokes into shades, looking for and arguing over their own history. There are poems of verb and substance. Staley's language astonishes in its range and in the density of its meaning, This is wonderful poetry. And now my comments. All One Breath Selected Poems of Harry Staley, Snail's Pace Press, 5th title, is our most ambitious effort to date. To be sure, Harry's poems are elegant, so we have the stuff we are looking for in a full-length book publishing project. The work is autobiographical and thematic, so the series of poems have the threads that tie them together. The collection is rich in metaphor, imagery, and characters that populate its page. So one is anxious to read the poems numerous times as the writing reveals its subtleties and richness. These are poems of experience and wit, so the reader is enthusiastic to unravel the poet's skill, and the exacting use of irony and pun please, surprise, and delight the reader. So one knows the poet is in full control, and at times perhaps the poet is having his fun with the reader and easily gets away with it. As an editor, I knew I had a very good book to work with. It is, to be sure, a gift, as we have had the hard struggle of choosing work in the past and knew immediately that All One Breath would be worth our energy and effort to bring it to fruition. I now want to give you Harry Staley.
I think I'll leave. I can't get more applause, so why bother? Wonderful. The reason I write books is so I can get to see all my friends. It's easier than giving a huge party. That's part of it. Ted Adams once told me he felt happier reading before people he does not know. And he went to New York happily and met a colleague right in the front row. I too feel much better people I don't know, and I don't have to leave. But somebody reminded me that I tend to feel my poems aren't where they should be yet, and I tend to call them poems in progress, and the acronym is PIP. These poems are PIPs. And I can't remember the name of the trio that hit one another, but the Three Stooges I was reminded of. The poem divided basically into 4. It's an improvement, 4 passages, 4 panels. Shell-shock chaplain, only 3. That's why this book is more expensive. And we start with the life of Thomas Kelly, and then Professor Kelly, and then Cain, brother of Abel, and other relatives, and Uncle Orville and Beatrice, and you'll know more about them before I have finished. 4th commandment, and usually before I read this, I ask, what is the 4th commandment? Not realizing it might be different from one segment of Protestantism and Catholicism. However, I had it, the 3rd commandment, keep holy the Sabbath, which would have had nothing to do with this poem, so I'm glad I changed it. 4th commandment is honor thy father and mother. They started as giants, huge and loving. They diminished imperceptibly. From the bedroom, I heard the 2 of them squabbling in the living room. I held on to beds and table legs and chairs. I learned to walk. Hunting and gathering, my father found scudding on the pavement a $20 bill, 8,000 gumdrops, 200 leaves, 10 bottles of gin. A sporty God revealed himself in the midst of depression. I learned to pray. In the time of hunger, Hitler, Hoover, God revealed himself. By the time my father died, I was just his size. In sleep, sometimes I try to force them to apologize. Father, you forgot to say thank you. You left the table, the room, the world, without excusing yourself. Mother, have you done your homework? Never talk with your mouth full. Keep covered, it's cold out. Mom, Dad, don't talk back to me. Never, ever talk back. Never, never, ever. All right. You're grounded. Just for that, you're grounded. How about that? Grounded forever. Don't tell me that's not fair. Just wait till I'm your age. Just you wait. You'll see. You'll see. I said 200 leaves. I meant 200 loaves. 200 leaves is much too subtle. Thomas Kelly gets older, but still is a child, and I would be interested in what you think of this poem, unless you don't like it. It's called Sniper. I draw a bead on Daddy's Nash. Ka-chow! I missed. Ka-chow! Wounded him. Ka-chow! Ka-chow! Dead. Daddy, ignorant survivor, waves, parks the car, and waves again. Of course, with this one also, I'd like your opinion. These are the pips. I feel aren't there quite yet, but it's called Entreaty, 1945. The speaker is in Germany after the war. Through the window I heard 12 golden children lilt my pseudonym, Erich von Stroheim. My phony name offered them the afternoon before. Wie heißen Sie? Erich von Stroheim, Kinder. Erich von Stroheim? Ja. Next morning. Erich von Stroheim, Erich von Stroheim. I, Erich von Stroheim, a.k.a. Corporal Kelly, United States Army. Would I, a funny, friendly guy, almost 25, wake up, get out of bed, go down and play, Harold Ely, play? I don't know. What would the grown-ups say? And finally, his last reflection on the war, a poem called Valor. In childhood and through most of puberty, I dreamed I would be brave in the proud smoke of battle, and loved by healthy girls whose flesh I'd spare by wounding other flesh. And I believed whatever weapon pierced my flesh, bullet, shrapnel, sword, or bayonet, renewed the sacred penetrations that sanctify the world. Adam in paradise, Cain at the plow, Mary and her ghost, the nails that pinioned Christ. But once in war I came to know I was outranked by any child great moonlight bombers slew. And that, of course, is pretty much his war experience. There are many other poems about it. You have to buy the book. They're much better, the other poems. Now, Professor Kelly, and sort of an invocation he himself might have written about his life and about his creativity. Invocation. I hope all of you know Milton word for word, all of it. It will help for this poem. The poem is somewhat shorter than Paradise Lost. Invocation. Sing, heavenly moose. Make thou the depth of swollen midnight, darkness risible. I pine for paranomastic brilliancies, provoking laughter preternatural. Monstrous undulations of giggle and guffaw, as though old Aeolus and some companion gods of flatulence and storm send gasps and gusts of wind that, gathering, explode in ruthless hurricane across the lawns of Troy and Rome and Gloversville, New York. O horned god of comedy, I beg the balm of wide approval and applause. This is Professor Kelly. Some people said they liked this poem. I had some problems with it, but it's called The Rat. Walking down the cemetery road, I came upon the body of a rat, spared by scavengers, apparently intact, in open air beside the buried dead. Prosperous paunch, a silent bulge against the tarmac black, its blacker tail tapered toward the roadside trench. I hate rats. Shrewd, they scrounge through filth and prosper, giggling, squealing, nibbling, in ghetto walls or barns, or scuttling through the fetid fields of death. Not this one for a moment, not this one, still soft to sight. I saw its corpse like someone slain you trip across, enemy or friend, after battle's done. Field rations clumped in the dead crop, stiffening away like any mortal man, like any guy, every lust, every hope, every instinct gone. Now for someone alive, I mean human, I'm not so good with pagination. Pantheism. I had thought to call it panpsychism, and somebody said I shouldn't. Pantheism or panpsychism, the epigraph. I gag on jargon, but it pays my way. It is deeply creative to exploit a cliche. This is a quote from Dr. Sigmund Jung. Lacan is up to his old catoptrics. That's the study of mirrors, but you all know that. Lacan is up to his old catoptrics. Furthermore, his is a false image in his own Lacan glass. My ex-therapist is non-directive and laconic. She told me I'm not the only one to pun on nuns, but to dream nun puns is idiopathic. Almost every night, nuns tell me to eschew gum. I tell them I never eschew anything I cannot swallow. They told me to stop punning about them. I assure them I'll kick the habit. They remind me that pious ejaculations, that is to say, little prayers, help prevent sins of emission. And whenever I feel like sinning, I should ask the Blessed Virgin to help me. My counselor informed me that Lacan makes all this clear. The diagnosis is simple. You are muddle-aged. Your nunnage is complicating your dotage. Therefore, since you have a debt wish, keep a budget and respect the treasure principle. You want to deride Derrida. Don't. Take comfort in Lacan's maxim. We see ourselves in a glass starkly. After a few more sessions, you won't need to pun. You won't have none problems at all. Remember, puns are the lowest form of humus. Punsters are dishonest, totally fraudulent. Thank you. Do keep your applause for the end, where it can be tumultuous. This is Lacan again. That's the title of it, Lacan again. Mendaces as mirrors, as memory, image on a red brick wall, image in the wind, the piss in epistemology, the sip in insipid, Lacan with the wind. I've lost a lot of my restraint in these aging years. Now, Lacan again. Now, waiting for Beckett. The title's the best part of it, but I'll read it anyway. Waiting for Beckett. He was having us on. What he was doing was having us on. Had us on, and now that he's gone, like that. Space shrank toward him. That's what happened. Space narrowed to nothing. The old horizon closed inside the unsurrounding center of the world. Center swallowed circumference. That's what happened. Scape lost scope. Worldscape, skyscape, seascape, landscape, roomscape, skullscape, zero. There's no here. Not that he's gone there. There? Gone there? Where? We don't know where. Anywhere. So there. Nothing itself happens there. There is where nothing is itself. Vale, acque, ave. Something here then? Listen. Something here? Having us on? Listen. Now, here I am imitating Finnegan's Wake. It's done in Wake language, and there are times that Joyce was almost as good as this poem. Finnegan's Wake. Some people might think I'm serious. Finnegan's Wake is magnificent. This is called Waking Towards the Last December. Be very patient. You won't get it. It's not gettable. Waking Towards the Last December. Nomad's land. Squarl and squeaks in the fiercest. Can't see the florist for the freeze. The days of the mumps mismumbled as the sleeves of the breeze or tumbled. They are misflayed, miscountered. Oh, let the viatic come. Pop prelitzers and wine to fry in the lowest fright of angels. Oh, for one gust of wind, one ice September tray, the last place meal, the lost treadmill. Oh, munch the whole wheat white attic crumbs. Drowned in deep ocean, drained of devotion, a weed to the wide is surf fishing. In the beckoning is the void. Those were his lost birds, flown through the winter pain of death. He dried sceneless, all his mortal sense forsaken. Oh, the underscraper will scour his skin till the scars shine. His day that rose in dusk unto dusk is interned. You could try Portrait of the Artist if you prefer it, but it is what it is. Finally, not finally for this passage, there are many more passages to go. But the end of the Professor Kelly passage is a poem some of you are familiar with about his grandson. Can you hear me? Because if you can't and you want to, raise your hands. Should have raised them earlier. About his grandson. He runs ahead of me. I call him back. Stay near me, Steve, until we reach the park. He no longer toddles, loves to run until he's out of breath. Stay near me, Steve. It's almost dark. I'd like to tell him paradise means walled-in park, where no one ever had to feel ashamed, and none were ever old enough to totter, and beauty was not yet sin deep, and none would sense a pun in out of breath. Long before the apple and the snake, long before the scepter and the orb. He runs ahead of me toward years and days and afternoons I'll never know. Even so, I try to call him back. Even so, call him back and stay forever in the daylight, in the park. So that's the last of the Professor Kelly poems. Now, this is Cain and Other Relatives. I have a thing about Cain, but let that go for now. I haven't murdered anybody or anything like that. But, I have two poems, one in this book and one in the old book. This is the passage called Cain and Other Relatives. This is Cain. Remember, Abel murdered first, killed a creature, one our father Adam named after we were made to leave the walled-in park where Eve, our mother, shared with him the fruit of knowledge and made us mortal. He named us all tiger, turtle, serpent, lamb. Named me creature, Abel, son. Every creature named, every single one. But none was slain until Abel offered God his kill, and God approved. I never fattened calf or lamb for sacrifice. I, named creature, knew each beast, even as I know myself. I offered bread and wine, crust and juice, nothing in disguise, no hidden clots or scars. My apples stored no guilt. Among his avatars, I venerated Ceres, hated Mars. I consecrated bloodless feast to celebrate the harvest, sang Te Deum, Laudamus, and left each lamb of God feeding in the field. I suppose you know that Cain does mean creature in certain philologies, and Abel does mean son in certain philologies. That's why I leapt upon that and thought I'd have a good word for Cain, which reminds me, and probably might remind you of Mark Twain about Satan. He should be innocent until proved guilty, and not the other way around, guilty before proved one way or the other. He said it's un-American, it's un-English. It's French. Was anyone here a New York Giants fan in the 30s? Baseball? Good, one. The rest of you may stay, but this has to do with that. This is Uncle Gus Kelly. Spring 1938. Toward the very last, almost dead, Gus Kelly, baseball fan, salesman, poker man, St. John's alumnus, said, "The cards God dealt were low, mostly spades, none really wild, and none of them a joker. I had," he said, "a paradox for openers, and a rare deck of baseball cards for sentimental solitaire when nobody else was there. Not Zeke Benura, not Bordigaray, not Boots Poffenberger, not Blubber Malone. I was alone. Not Hal Schumacher, number 17. Not Mel Ott, number 3, number 8. I watched those two play a nearly perfect game. They were great. Cheap bleacher seat for maybe $50 in Ebbets Field in 1938. Schumi shut them out, and Mel Ott shot a big one into Bedford for the only score. And Goody Rosen got the only Dodger hit. He was erased at second base. I don't recall his number. I don't recall his face. But he was erased, all right, at second base. A double play. Twin killing, they sometimes say. Oh, he was erased. I ran across their names again in Dr. Zinzer's history course. Eugen Ott, who serves the Reich, a general, a diplomat, and a Schumacher named Kurt, who lost a leg from torture in a concentration camp. A socialist, Zinzer sneered, a social democrat. For all I know, there might have been a Jew named Rosen squeezed inside a boxcar with a number on his arm, more digits than on Goody's uniform. On the day I watched the game, I never heard of them. I was a fan. I watched the game. As for history, I suppose the Brooklyn Eagles morgue had Goody's name somewhere in a box score. Nowadays, they mostly play at night, but the lights are going out, and I forgot the score. Or maybe I don't care, and nobody else is there, just me alone. Nobody else is there, and maybe I don't care. Let's see, it's good to follow baseball, maybe. It was in the 30s. Does anyone remember anything? Mel Ott? Hal Schumacher? Wonderful. He was my hero. He went to college with my uncle. You probably all know that, though. But my uncle gave me a glove, and so I worship Hal Schumacher. Father, Son, Holy Ghost, Hal Schumacher. Not necessarily in that order. A second one about Uncle Gus. It's called nunx. Nunx is a suggestion, time is a suggestion of nunx. N-U-C means now in Latin. So I was told. Nunx. And epigraph, time is a succession of nunx, until nows. Aquinas, perhaps. And this is Gus Kelly talking. I'm running out of nunx, running out. They were beautiful, a few of them. Some guys had a basket full, some a box, some a little paper bag. One of them a handful in his pocket. I forget his name. Father Brood said he'd save them for his coffin and for the afterlife, where there's a lot of them, a Jacob's pot of them. What do they look like, nunx? They're transparent, brief, they're infinitesimal. They leave on arrival. So that's his understanding of time. Now, a few, another part of the family, Uncle Orville and Beatrice. That's Thomas Kelly's uncle. And their name is Ely. Uncle Orville Ely and Beatrice Ely. This poem is principal parts about Orville Ely. He was a school superintendent. I don't think we could hold that against him. It's just, they're wonderful, some of my best friends there at school. Anyway, principal parts, Orville Ely. Day in, day out, night after night, school superintendent Ely searched for B, little B, even for the bee that ran away, sulked off, bad grammar, new nubility, cheap, sulked off in a rage of raucous music after the last retarded tantrum. From a home where he could bathe himself clean as his grammar, where the soap smelled moral, the porcelain looked Protestant, linen and shirt and soul all unstained, he worshiped a clean-cut Christ. Grace was said before each meal. One mistake in grammar earned an insult. 2 mistakes in grammar earned a slap. 3 mistakes in grammar sent one from the table. Grace was offered after every meal. Searched for months through scummy neighborhoods and streets reeking like latrines. Orville Ely, well-dressed and terrified, assaulted by the sight of life-sized dolls, pneumatic, in flimsy, dirty lingerie, plump and sickening, as large as B, in shops that smelled of sweat and sin and urine. Home again, beside his well-washed wife, his dream sinks into Manhattan Harbor. Pollution stains the porcelain teeth, the swelling eyes, the gills, the membranes, the delicate entrails of edible fish. Pollution taints the alleyways and avenues, contaminates the breath and lungs and brains of pigeons, pimps, and prostitutes, and the heart of prowling Ely. His right arm long and mean, blemished with tattoos. He prowls, young again, silky mean, the long arm and the mean hand like a poisoned snake, angry fingers clutching the mean knife. Ely aches for victims, for pimps, fags, pigeons, johns, pneumatic dolls, runaways, 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 going, went, gone. All one victim, androgynous as zeppelins, one infected soul sloughing off in sobs of fog. Ely himself the wounding eye, the wounded me. He gets happier in life. And then about Beatrice, just a few poems from that. Here we are. Beatrice remembers her mother. I want to be sure. I didn't plan to read it, but I will. Beatrice remembers her mother. Sometimes, singing me to sleep, she sang too well, and made me cry. She sang beyond the ceiling and the moon. She sang me past the harmony of stars, through old expansions of the world, through depths of midnight and breadth of days. She sang into my future, where I heard and hear ambiguous refrains. She sang past mountain clouds and castle clouds, past blues of summer near the lake, toward winter and the silence of our life in empty rooms, abandoned long ago, where even now she's singing me to sleep, knowing where I've gone and where I go. Beatrice has changed a little bit before we get into this poem. It's called Beatrice Trip. It's not the archaic meaning of the word trip, which has to do with drugs. Beatrice Trip. He pranced off into my tomorrow, leaving me here in his yesterday. I'm going to find me a friend and borrow money for shit and blast away. Earn me a sinister AKA. Christ is rocking on the mantelpiece, strutting his stuff in a seamless gown, rehearsing an act with a couple of thieves, going to rock and roll all over town. The bad thief drums and the good plays fiddle with a single and a double and a triple paradiddle. Sideman Satan's going to bring me down. Sideman Satan's going to bring me down. I suppose eventually he does. I may lose all my friends with this. Be very tolerant. It's called Beatrice Feast of the Epiphany. I just got an okay. Beatrice Feast of the Epiphany, and this is written with all devotion. Asleep in the street near a people's drugstore, dreaming of milk in a shiny white bowl, I pissed in the pants I had pissed in before, while two angry angels fought for my soul. God took on flesh, so they say, in the winter, swaddled, immortal, and not very old, sucking soft breasts and warm in the manger. He pissed like a human, asleep in the cold. Beatrice in surgery, just 3 more poems. The old diminished hum, there, down there, underneath the coma, underneath the clip, dip, snip, snap, there inside the shining blood, inside the secret hollows of memory and bone, sinking past a final resonance, sounding out toward spaceless black surrounding our history. Frightened, I shiver back to flesh and vulgar harmony, the mortal synthesis of sight and sound. I hear a voice implore a mourner to rejoice. He'll shine before the glory of the beatific. Pain wrenches through my waking guts and moves me to forgive. I cut short the word beatific to beatif. That's how desperate one is occasionally for rhymes. Now I suppose I promise. It's all right to do one more? Okay. I promise. Somebody held a hand. I promised Judy Johnson. She's very angry I didn't include. I have included some poems from Shell Shock Chaplin in the new book. Makes it thicker. But I promised, since I didn't include it in the new book, that I would read it. Or for her sake, I'm reading it tonight. I think some of you are, I know some of you are familiar with it. It's called Chalk It. Some are. Chalk it. Chalk it, chalk it all. Chalk it up to the alphabets, to chalk marks, to children chewing chocolate, to choosing sides, to cheering Chuck Klein, Charlie Root, to checking the answers. Chalk it all. Chalk it up to learning what to say from Pacelli, Spellman, Sheen, Pius X. To old men ranting, to pledge allegiance, to prelates chanting in church. Chalk it up to old men checking to find me out, to well-dressed cops, to one old man chuckling greetings to Charles. Chalk it up to chants, to checkpoints, to chicken out, to chevrons, to chaplains soothing corpses. Chalk the shrewd comedians, chalk Al Jolson, Bob Hope, and Charities. Chalk it up to those great boys, our boys, and their chums, face down in the mud, chilled to the broken bone, to worms at lunch under choppers churning. To charge 5, fuse quick, shell HE, to chunk, to chalk dust, to chunk, chunk, to marrow, to chunk, 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 to Charlie 6, to Charlie, I read you, Wilco, over, out, and chalk it. Chalk it all, chalk it up to erasing the board and cleaning the erasers, to chiding the children and chalking their bones. And chalk it all, chalk all old men and alphabets and chortling cheaters sending greetings. And chalk you, chalk it all, chalk you, chalk it all. I don't want to stop reading at that note, but does anyone know what greetings to Charles might mean? This is a young audience, it's very depressing. When you were drafted in World War II, the notice starts with greetings to so-and-so. I couldn't stand that. That's why I enlisted. It was too corny. I didn't want anything from the draft board. So, any questions?